There is definitely a vocal minority of Republicans, and they tend to be the ones who get the big media attention, who have said that they want to pull back on assistance to Ukraine. But the majority opinion within the GOP, including very significantly Mitch McConnell over in the Senate, they still support aiding Ukraine on a national security basis. The position of many of the Republicans, actually the majority position of the Republicans, is sort of, we'll provide the military aid, and you know what, the European Union, they can provide the financial aid.
Yeah, okay.
If we can get into the gridlock rally element of the midterm elections and how it applies to the stock markets, Ted, you've got pharma, you've got these very politicized sectors, pharma, energy, banking, tech, defence to a large degree, sectors with regulatory targets on their back. Under a divided government scenario, I guess they can breathe a sigh of relief because that oversight won't be put on them anytime soon.
At least not nearly as strongly. The stocks that would benefit from GOP control of Congress are indicating, in terms of the way that they're trading, that markets expect actually a sweep of Congress today, where the Republicans will take both the House and the Senate. There's a research firm, it's an asset management firm, Strategas. They have a research arm that has done they basically set up two dueling portfolios. One, stocks that would benefit from a Democratic-controlled House and Senate, and another that would benefit from the control of the GOP. Since October began, that GOP portfolio is far outperforming the Democratic portfolio.
I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, if you don't mind, Ted. And I want to bring in this issue of fraud. And then, of course, in 2016, when you look back, the Russia connection there, we were talking about Russia, Ukraine. And now you have this extraordinary situation. I want to bring in Elon Musk and Twitter now, of finance and politics, the world's richest man urging his Twitter followers to vote Republican in the midterms. There are huge implications here for free speech, huge implications here for Twitter, and possibly even a former President Donald Trump reinstated in Twitter. He's made no secret that he wants to run in 2024. How much of this is a rehearsal for 2024.
A whole lot more misinformation on TWTR as well, right?
Yeah, indeed they are. You know, Elon, before he had control of Twitter, liked to talk all the time about freedom of speech, but he's already shown this week that he's actually not all that tolerant of freedom of speech when it's criticizing him. He, at least temporarily shut down a number of accounts of people who were ridiculing him. And so, it's very difficult to tell where he's going to take this politically, but it's beginning to look more and more like the Democratic fears, the liberal consensus about his positions is the one that, Elon's positions, is the one that seems to be coming to the fore now that we get to the, where the rubber hits the road.
Indeed. I mean, the overarching theme here is, I know that President Biden doesn't like the word, but this is, love it or hate it, this is a referendum on inflation, the politics of inflation, the cost of living crisis. And in the same week that we are going to have a CPI report. So I guess the president can either declare victory or say that there's more work to do on the strength of that inflation number. Yeah,
if there was one thing that could happen this week that would distract us from the CPI report, it's these midterm, elections. Curtis Chin, who you guys just now had on air, put it really well. He said, this one's close to home. And that's true. When people are suffering, they're thinking about how much diapers cost. They're thinking about how much gasoline costs. They're thinking about how much food costs. And, it's very difficult when you're in sort of difficult straits, or at least straits that have become more difficult than they were like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's very difficult for you to focus on somewhat abstract messaging that the Democrats have been putting forth. Also, the Democrats have not been doing themselves any favor because they've tended to sort of play down these issues that are clearly personal to people, like inflation, also like crime and immigration.
Unemployment as well. We know that the Fed is laser focused on unemployment. We saw it tick up in the last payrolls number. Post the midterms, that is going to continue to be an issue. And if unemployment does really start moving higher, and if the labour market does crack, then political pressure on the Fed. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah. Ted, let's get on to talk about what, I mean, if polls are right, and you've got the Republicans flipping both the House and the Senate, what it means for U.S.-China relations.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's a bigger deal than U.S.-Russia, right? So it seems likely, and it's important to remember, folks who are not from the United States, that, you know, Congress is not the executive branch. The executive branch, Department of Justice, State Department, all those entities still controlled by President Biden, no matter what happens today. But if you think that China got upset from Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan, which China did get upset from Nancy Pelosi visiting Taiwan, I think that when you have a Republican Congress, you're probably going to see that happen more, not less. You might notice that very few guys in the GOP, if any, criticized Pelosi for that trip. In fact, they were praising her. And this is a group of individuals who will take every single opportunity they can get to criticize Nancy Pelosi. So they can still do things like that. Congress can still do things like introducing policies that disincentivize investment in manufacturing in China, or incentivize pulling it away from China. They can still do things like put forth limitations on certain products, whether they can be exported or not. These are the very things with their attentions currently, and that's probably going to get tougher under a GOP Senate. Should we have a Senate and House controlled by the GOP, then rather than softer.
And then if you look at China and the upshot of the Communist Party Congress, Xi president for life, it seems, and implications for Taiwan, there's a singularity there in terms of the policy approach that is arguably going to be lacking. Yeah. A singularity, a single vision in terms of foreign policy that could be lacking under a divided government scenario. So arguably, China has the upper hand here.
Yeah, indeed. So, Ted, the vote itself, right? For some states, Pennsylvania, Georgia, for example, it could be days, potentially could even be weeks before we know, right?
Yeah. Early ballot voting is more popular in the United States now than it has ever been. Those votes have to be counted. They're counted on a delay, typically for most states. Every state is different. Some states are better at it than others. And so there are critical states where we won't know. Georgia's had a ton of early ballot voting. Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, it's some of the critical states as well that have had that happen. And so it might be days. And just as it always seems to be the case now that every U.S. election on the national level is, a game of inches. It's always so close, and there's always so much on the line. There's so much tension. Lawsuits get brought in even before the votes are counted. We're probably going to see more of those. We're almost certainly going to see more of those complications.